He mocked an old man in a MAGA hat at a clothing store, laughing and ridiculing him, until they discovered he was the owner of the entire chain. What happens next will leave you speechless and make you rethink how you judge others. Never underestimate simplicity. Sometimes, the most unassuming people hold the greatest strength. Comments below where you're watching from, and if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel. Life, inspirational, and motivational tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories. Thanks. Let's start the story. Metro-style fashions buzzed with the energy of a busy weekend afternoon. The store, located in the heart of a bustling shopping mall, was alive with the chatter of customers, the faint hum of background music, and the shuffle of hangers as shoppers browsed through racks of trendy clothes. The air smelled faintly of new fabric and store-bought perfume, a mix that felt distinctly retail. And voice darted between customers, some answering questions, others standing idly while pretending to organize shelves. Amidst this hive of activity, Richard Benson stepped quietly through the glass doors. In his late 50s, Richard had a composed demeanor that often masked the sharp mind behind it. Dressed in a plain button-down shirt and dark jeans, he carried an old leather wallet and wore a red MAGA hat atop his salt and pepper hair. The hat's bold white text, "Make America Great Again," stood out prominently, drawing the occasional glance from passers-by. He adjusted it slightly as he entered, his movements deliberate yet understated. Richard had no intention of drawing attention to himself. In fact, he preferred it that way. As the hidden owner of Metro-style fashions, a successful nationwide clothing chain, Richard rarely made public appearances. For years, he had chosen to remain in the background, entrusting the day-to-day operations of his empire to a competent executive team. But today was different. Richard wasn't here to make an appearance as a corporate head. He was here as an observer. Recently, complaints about this particular store had reached his desk. Customers had reported rude staff, dismissive behavior, and an overall lack of professionalism. Richard knew that such behavior could tarnish the reputation he had worked so hard to build. He decided to see the problem firsthand, opting for an incognito visit to gauge the store's culture and assess whether the complaints held merit. The hat, though personal, served a secondary purpose. It allowed him to see how people reacted to someone who might not fit the profile of their ideal customer. Richard scanned the store with a critical eye. Near the checkout counter stood Amanda Lewis, the store manager. Amanda was impeccably dressed in a tailored blouse and pencil skirt, her blonde hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. Her sharp features reflected her sharp personality. Ambitious, but with a habit of judging customers by their appearances. Richard had read complaints specifically about her condescending attitude, and now, watching her bark an order at a junior associate, he began to see why. Once distracted him by shouting at the waitress who stepped out of their way. Jake Martinez, one of the sales associates, lounged near the fitting rooms, his name tag slightly crooked. In his mid-20s, Jake had an easy charm that often masked his lack of seriousness. Richard noticed how Jake mimicked Amanda's behavior, laughing at a joke she made about a customer's outfit as though they were partners in some exclusive club. Richard frowned slightly, making a mental note of the interaction. He blanched as Jake admired the man's handsome face. He was extraordinarily pretty. Then there was Sophia Clark. Standing near the back of the store, Sophia was folding clothes with a quiet efficiency. Her kind eyes and approachable demeanor set her apart from her colleagues. Despite her professionalism, she seemed hesitant to speak up, as though she had learned to keep her head down amidst the store's toxic atmosphere. Richard noticed how customers gravitated toward her, sensing her genuine willingness to help. Richard's presence didn't immediately attract much attention. Amanda gave him a brief once-over when he walked in, her eyes lingering on his hat before dismissing him as unimportant. Jake didn't even glance his way. Only Sophia, from her station near the back, offered him a polite smile when their eyes met. Richard returned the smile, his instincts telling him she might be the exception to the behaviors he had come to observe. A very agreeable assemblage of people, in my view. Richard tossed his presents on the desk, quickly unfolding a photograph tape. As Richard began browsing through the racks, he listened carefully to the conversations around him. A group of teenagers laughed loudly near the clearance section, while a young mother tried to keep her toddler entertained in the stroller. Richard pretended to examine a jacket, all the while noting how Amanda spoke dismissively to a middle-aged woman who had asked about an item's price. "It's on the tag," Amanda said curtly, her tone suggesting she thought the question was beneath her. Jake joined her at the counter shortly after, leaning in to whisper something that made Amanda laugh. Richard caught a fragment of their conversation, something about how people like that always needed extra attention. He didn't react outwardly, but a flicker of disapproval crossed his face. This was exactly the kind of behavior he had hoped not to find. He continued browsing, careful to keep his body language relaxed. His presence didn't demand attention, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Richard wasn't here to be the CEO. He was here to be the customer everyone ignored. For now, he observed quietly, taking in the dynamics of a store that was beginning to reveal its flaws. Richard entered the store with a quiet air, his steps deliberate as he took in the bustling scene around him. Amanda and Jake stood at the counter near the entrance, their laughter ringing out as they leaned toward each other. They seemed completely engrossed in their conversation, which was laced with mockery and thinly veiled disdain for a customer who had just left. Richard paused briefly, pretending to adjust his hat, before making his way toward the counter. Amanda was the first to notice him. Her eyes flicked up from the counter, and her gaze swept over him, lingering on the bold red MAGA hat perched atop his head. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight narrowing of her eyes and a curl at the corner of her lips. It was the look of someone who had already decided they had no time for the person in front of them. "Yes?" Amanda asked, her tone clipped, her hands still resting on the edge of the counter. Jake, standing beside her, glanced over and immediately caught the sight of the hat. He smirked, clearly enjoying whatever judgment Amanda had silently passed. "Good afternoon," Richard said with a calm smile. "I'm looking for a particular jacket I saw online. Could you help me find it?" Amanda raised an eyebrow, her gaze drifting once more to his hat before settling back on his face. She sighed softly, almost theatrically, before nodding toward the store's far end. "Jackets are in the back. You can look there," she said, her tone making it clear she wasn't interested in assisting him further. "Is there a specific section I should check?" Richard asked, his voice patient but firm. Amanda glanced at Jake, who chuckled softly. "Specific section," she repeated under her breath, the sarcasm evident. Then, in a louder voice, she said, "Just the back wall. You can't miss it." "Blind forming?" came the reply. "We..." As Richard turned to head toward the racks, Amanda leaned toward Jake. "Dated fashion sense to match the hat," she muttered, just loud enough for Richard to hear. Jake snorted, adding, "Probably looking for something from the 80s. Richard didn't react. As Richard browsed the racks, Amanda and Jake continued their hushed conversation, occasionally glancing in his direction with poorly concealed smirks. A few customers nearby noticed the interaction and cast awkward glances at the counter, unsure whether to intervene or ignore it. Richard tried to focus on the jackets in front of him, but the dismissive behavior followed him like a shadow. When he found the jacket he was looking for, he noticed it wasn't available in his size. Richard approached the counter again, holding the item. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Amanda, "do you have this in a large?" Amanda barely glanced up, her fingers tapping idly on the countertop. "What's on the rack is what we've got," she said dismissively. Her tone carried the same irritation she had displayed earlier. Richard remained composed. "Could you check the stock room, just in case?" Amanda sighed loudly this time, drawing the attention of nearby customers. She turned to Jake, who shrugged. "Do you want me to go check?" he asked, his tone dripping with false enthusiasm. "No," Amanda replied, shaking her head. "If it's not out here, it's not available." She looked back at Richard, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Anything else?" Before Richard could respond, Sophia stepped forward. She had been quietly watching the interaction from a few feet away, her discomfort growing with each sarcastic comment and dismissive glance. "Let me check for you," Sophia said gently, taking the jacket from Richard's hands. She offered him a warm smile. "It'll just take a minute." "Thank you," Richard said sincerely. "I appreciate it." As Sophia walked toward the stockroom, Amanda rolled her eyes. "She always has to be the hero," she muttered to Jake, who chuckled in agreement. While Sophia was gone, Richard stood at the counter, quietly observing Amanda and Jake's continued whispering and laughter. Their unprofessionalism was blatant, and it was clear to him that they didn't care who noticed. Sophia returned moments later, holding the jacket in the size Richard had requested. "Here you go," she said, handing it to him. It was right at the front of the stockroom. Richard accepted the jacket and handed the bag over. Richard's expression softened, and he gave her a small nod. "Thank you. That was very kind of you." Sophia smiled modestly. "No problem at all. Let me know if there's anything else I can help with." As Richard made his way to the fitting room, Amanda shot Sophia a look. "You didn't need to do that," she said sharply. "Some customers just aren't worth the effort." Sophia didn't respond. Instead, she turned her attention to another customer who had been waiting patiently for assistance, choosing to focus on her work rather than engage in Amanda's negativity. Richard, now in the fitting room, reflected on everything he had just witnessed. It wasn't just Amanda's behavior that concerned him. It was the culture she and Jake perpetuated. But amidst the negativity, Sophia's kindness stood out like a beacon. Her professionalism and willingness to go above and beyond had not gone unnoticed, and Richard knew that she represented the kind of values he wanted metro-style fashions to uphold. For now he remained quiet, letting the pieces of the day's events fall into place. Richard stepped out of the fitting room, the jacket draped neatly over his arm, and approached the counter where Amanda and Jake stood. His expression was calm, but his presence carried an air of quiet authority that neither of them seemed to notice. Amanda glanced up, her forced smile doing little to mask her impatience. Whatever they really wanted to talk about, they had an adequate opportunity to be quiet. "I'd like to speak to the store manager," Richard said, his tone polite but firm. Amanda's smile stiffened as she straightened her posture. "That would be me," she replied, her voice laced with a hint of condescension. "What can I help you with?" Richard placed the jacket on the counter and folded his hands over it. "I had some questions about the way customers are treated here. I've noticed some interactions today that seemed less than professional, and I wanted to understand if this is how things are typically handled." Amanda's eyes narrowed slightly, and a flicker of irritation crossed her face. She glanced at Jake, who smirked and leaned casually against the counter, clearly entertained by the exchange. "I'm not sure what you're implying," Amanda said, her tone sharp. "We do our best to help customers, but we can't please everyone." Richard remained composed. "I understand that, but as a customer, I've personally experienced some behavior today that felt dismissive and frankly unkind." Amanda let out a short laugh, her patience clearly wearing thin. "Well, I'm sorry if you feel that way," she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "But we're a busy store, and we can't spend all day catering to individual complaints." Richard tilted his head slightly, his calm demeanor unwavering. "I think it's important to address these issues not just for the sake of the customers, but for the reputation of the store." Amanda's forced smile disappeared entirely. She crossed her arms and leaned forward slightly, her voice growing colder. "If you don't like how things are done here, maybe you should shop somewhere else." The words hung in the air, and a few customers nearby glanced up from their browsing, their expressions ranging from discomfort to curiosity. Richard noticed the small crowd forming but didn't let it faze him. He kept his eyes on the final product and only watched for a change in color. "I think you're missing the point," Richard said evenly. "This isn't about me as a shopper. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels welcome and respected." Amanda rolled her eyes and let out a sigh loud enough for everyone to hear. Emboldened by the attention of the small audience, she gestured toward Richard's MAGA hat, her voice taking on a mocking tone. "You know, people like you don't belong here anyway," she said, her words cutting through the room. A few employees and customers gasped softly, while others turned their heads, pretending not to listen. Richard's expression didn't change. He stood still for a moment, letting her words sink in, then nodded slowly. "Thank you for your time," he said quietly, his voice steady. For the next 5 minutes, they spoke in silence. Without another word, Richard turned and walked toward the exit, the jacket still folded over his arm. The silence in the store was almost deafening as every eye followed his retreating figure. Amanda smirked triumphantly, while Jake chuckled under his breath. Sophia, standing near the back of the store, felt her chest tighten. She couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. As Richard reached the door, Sophia took a small step forward as if to stop them. But she hesitated. She watched helplessly as he pushed the door open and disappeared into the bustling mall. The uneasy feeling in her gut grew stronger, and she glanced at Amanda, whose smug demeanor only deepened Sophia's discomfort. Hours later, as the store began winding down for the evening, an email notification popped up on the staff computer. Amanda clicked on it absent-mindedly, her eyes scanning the subject line. "Emergency video call with Metro Style Fashions. CEO, mandatory attendance." "What's this about?" Jake asked, leaning over her shoulder. "No idea," Amanda replied, her confidence faltering slightly. "Probably some boring corporate announcement." Sophia read the email from her station, her pulse quickening. Something about the timing of the meeting felt significant, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it had to do with the man in the MAGA hat. The staff gathered in the back room at the appointed time, the air thick with curiosity and unease. Amanda stood near the front, her arms crossed, while Jake leaned against the wall, his usual smirk in place. Sophia sat quietly in the corner, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The screen in front of them flickered to life, and the face of Richard Benson appeared. He was dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his posture exuding quiet authority. But what drew the most attention was the unmistakable red MAGA hat still perched on his head. The room fell silent. Amanda's smug expression vanished in an instant, replaced by a mixture of shock and dread. Jake's smirk faltered as he shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between the screen and Amanda. Sophia's breath caught in her throat as realization dawned. "Good evening, everyone," Richard began, his voice calm but firm. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Richard Benson. I am the CEO and owner of Metro Style Fashions." The silence in the room deepened, broken only by the faint hum of the computer's cooling fan. Amanda's face turned a deep shade of red, and Jake looked like he wanted to disappear into the wall. Richard continued, his tone steady and composed. "Earlier today, I visited your store as a customer. What I experienced was both enlightening and deeply disappointing." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the staff as if he could see them through the screen. "I witnessed behavior that does not align with the values of this company. Behavior that was unprofessional, disrespectful, and entirely unacceptable." His words landed like a hammer, and the weight of the moment was palpable. Sophia sat frozen, her heart pounding, while Amanda and Jake squirmed uncomfortably. The other employees exchanged nervous glances, their expressions a mix of confusion and fear. Richard's eyes softened slightly as he continued. "However, amidst the negativity, I also witnessed something positive. One of your colleagues showed kindness, professionalism, and a genuine willingness to help. Sophia Clark, thank you for embodying the values that Metro Style Fashion stands for." Sophia's eyes widened and she felt a rush of emotions: gratitude, pride, and a faint sense of vindication. She nodded slightly, though she knew Richard couldn't see her. It took a minute or two, putting a very spare set of clothes hook up to the nightstand. "As for the rest of you," Richard said, his voice growing firmer, "there will be changes. Immediate changes." The screen went black, leaving the room in heavy silence. No one moved, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. The staff of Metro Style Fashions crowded into the cramped back room of the store, the air thick with tension and unease. The faint hum of the computer filled the silence as the employees exchanged quiet murmurs about the unexpected video call. Amanda stood near the front, her arms crossed and her posture stiff. Though she wore a usual air of confidence, her shifting gaze betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. Jake leaned casually against the wall, but even he couldn't hide his discomfort. Sophia sat at the back of the room, her hands nervously clasped in her lap, unsure of what was about to unfold. The screen flickered to life and the room fell silent. As the image of Richard Benson appeared, a collective gasp rippled through the staff. Dressed in a tailored suit with the same red MAGA hat he'd worn earlier that day, Richard stared directly into the camera, his expression calm but commanding. Recognition dawned instantly. Amanda's face turned pale, her smirk disappearing in an instant. Jake shifted uncomfortably, his smirk disappearing as he avoided eye contact with anyone. Sophia's heart raced as she realized the significance of what was happening. "Good evening, everyone," Richard began, his voice measured and steady. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Richard Benson. I am the CEO and owner of Metro-Style Fashions." The weight of his words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Amanda's jaw tightened, and Jake's confident posture crumbled as he leaned further into the wall, wishing he could melt into it. Sophia sat frozen, her mind racing through the events of the day. "This afternoon I visited your store as a customer," Richard continued, his tone calm but firm. "What I experienced was both enlightening and deeply disappointing. I came here to observe firsthand how our employees interact with customers and represent this company. What I saw was far from what Metro-Style Fashion stands for." His eyes seemed to pierce through the screen, scanning the room as if he could see each of them individually. Amanda's hands clenched into fists at her sides, and Jake swallowed hard, his earlier bravado completely gone. "I witnessed behavior that was dismissive, unprofessional, and frankly unacceptable," Richard said. "Mockery, disrespect, and a lack of basic customer service have no place in this company. These attitudes not only harm our customers, but also damage the reputation we've worked so hard to build." He paused, letting his words sink in. The silence in the room was deafening. Amanda shifted uncomfortably, her pale complexion now flushed with embarrassment. Jake stared at the floor, his usual smirk replaced with a nervous grimace. Richard's voice softened slightly as he continued. "However, amidst the negativity, I also witnessed something positive. One of your colleagues demonstrated the professionalism and kindness that this company values above all else. Sophia Clark, please stand." Sophia's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She hesitated for a moment before slowly rising to her feet, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. Her cheeks flushed as she looked at the screen, unsure of what to say. "Sophia," Richard said, his tone warm, "thank you for embodying the values we strive for at Metro-Style Fashions. Your willingness to assist a customer, even in an environment where others chose not to, did not go unnoticed. You are an example of what this company should represent." Sophia nodded, her voice barely above a whisper as she said, "Thank you, Mr. Benson." Richard smiled faintly before turning his attention back to the room at large. His tone hardened slightly as he said, "As for the rest of you, there will be changes, immediate changes." Amanda stiffened, her eyes darting toward Jake, who looked as though he were trying to disappear into the wall. The tension in the room was palpable as Richard continued. "Effective immediately," he said, "Amanda Lewis will be removed from her position as store manager. She will be placed on probation and required to complete a comprehensive training program on customer service and workplace ethics. This behavior is not reflective of the leadership we expect in our stores." Amanda's face flushed with anger and humiliation, but she didn't dare speak. The weight of Richard's authority left no room for argument. She snapped her mouth closed, wondering if her dictations might be missing. "Jake Martinez," Richard said, his gaze narrowing slightly, "you will also undergo mandatory training to address your unprofessional behavior. This training is not optional, and your continued employment will depend on your ability to meet the standards we expect." Jake's head hung low, his earlier cockiness replaced with visible shame. "Jake is..." Richard's tone softened again as he turned back to Sophia. Sophia Clark, you will be promoted to assistant manager. Your professionalism and dedication have shown that you have the potential to help foster a positive environment in this store. I trust you to lead by example and to help guide this team toward the culture we want to build. Sophia's eyes widened, and for a moment she was too stunned to respond. Finally, she managed a quiet, "Thank you, Mr. Benson. I won't let you down." Richard nodded, his expression serious but encouraging. "I believe you won't." He straightened slightly, his gaze sweeping the room once more. "Let me make one thing clear," he said, his voice firm. "This company was built on respect, integrity, and a commitment to our customers. It's not about a hat or a political statement. It's about how you treat every person who walks through those doors. Actions define character, and character defines this company." The room remained silent as Richard finished speaking. His image lingered on the screen for a moment before it flickered off, leaving the staff to sit in heavy silence. Amanda's arms were crossed tightly over her chest, her face a mixture of anger and embarrassment. Jake avoided everyone's gaze, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Sophia sat back down slowly, her mind racing as she tried to process everything that had just happened. The silence was finally broken by the soft murmur of voices as the employees began to disperse. Sophia stayed behind for a moment, her heart still pounding. She glanced at Amanda and Jake, who were quietly gathering their things, and felt a pang of sympathy despite their behavior. Change was coming, and it wouldn't be easy for anyone. As Sophia walked back to the sales floor, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Richard's words echoed in her mind, a reminder of the values she had always tried to uphold. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. "Where are you coming from?" Richard asked as they started walking. The days following the meeting marked a palpable shift in the atmosphere at Metro-style fashions. Amanda's demotion sent shockwaves through the team, serving as a stark reminder that actions carried consequences. Stripped of her managerial title, she was reassigned to a junior position and tasked with menial duties she once delegated with disdain. Her usual sharp-tongued confidence was now replaced with quiet resignation as she navigated her new reality. It was clear that the message had hit home. Jake, on the other hand, found himself thrust into a series of mandatory training sessions designed to address the unprofessionalism that had become second nature to him. The training sessions focused on customer service, workplace ethics, and the importance of empathy, concepts he had never taken seriously before. Jake's usual swagger was noticeably absent as he attended each session, his earlier arrogance replaced with a subdued humility. While the road to improvement was long, his colleagues noted small but meaningful changes in his behavior. Sophia, meanwhile, embraced her new role as assistant manager with determination. The promotion was a surprise, but one she took as both an honor and a responsibility. Her first priority was to create a more supportive and respectful workplace culture, one where kindness and professionalism weren't the exception but the rule. She started small, introducing team-building exercises and encouraging open communication among her colleagues. Her approachable demeanor and genuine care for her team quickly began to bridge gaps and mend fractured relationships. Through it all, Richard remained a steady presence, checking in periodically to ensure the changes were taking root. He had always believed that leadership wasn't about micromanaging, but about empowering the right people to lead with integrity. Sophia's progress reaffirmed his faith in that philosophy. Before concluding the company-wide video call, Richard had delivered one final message that resonated deeply with everyone. "It's not about a hat or how someone looks," he had said, his voice firm yet compassionate. "It's about how we treat every person who walks through our doors. Respect is the foundation of this company, and it will always come first. If we fail to treat others with dignity, we fail ourselves, and we fail the values that make metro-style fashion what it is." The words lingered long after the meeting ended, etched into the minds of every employee who heard them. For Sophia, they became a guiding principle as she took on her new responsibilities. For Jake, they were a humbling reminder of the work he still needed to do. And for Amanda, they were a challenge to rebuild her reputation and prove that she could rise above her mistakes. A week later, Richard visited another Metro-style fashions location unannounced. This time he entered without hesitation, the familiar red MAGA hat perched on his head. The staff greeted him warmly, their smiles genuine and their eagerness to assist him apparent. As he browsed the store, employees approached him with questions and updates, clearly invested in their work and proud of the progress they were making. The transformation was subtle but significant. Customers moved through the store with ease, their interactions with staff marked by mutual respect and courtesy. Employees worked together seamlessly, their camaraderie evident in the way they supported one another. For Richard, it was a glimpse of what the future could look like. A company built on respect, driven by shared values, and thriving because of input. As he prepared to leave, Richard paused near the counter to thank the team for their hard work. One employee, a young man who had recently joined the company, hesitated before speaking. "Mr. Benson," he said nervously, "I just wanted to say, I've never worked somewhere that values people the way this place does. It's inspiring." Richard smiled, his expression warm and genuine. "Thank you," he said. "That means a lot. But remember, it's not about me. It's about all of you and the choices you make every day. Keep treating people with respect, and this company will continue to grow in ways we can all be proud of. We can do this all day long and make a big difference." As Richard walked out of the store, he glanced back briefly, watching the employees as they resumed their work. For a moment, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The challenges of leadership were many, but moments like this made it all worthwhile. Adjusting his hat, he stepped into the bustling mall, confident that the foundation he had built was now stronger than ever. The story explores the impact of assumptions based on appearances and how they can lead to misguided actions. Richard, wearing a MAGA hat, becomes a target of judgment and ridicule, revealing how prejudice can cloud professionalism. It delves into the importance of kindness and respect, as seen through Sophia's genuine care for customers, showing that treating people with dignity transcends personal biases. The narrative also emphasizes accountability, as Amanda and Jake face consequences for their behavior, and highlights the possibility of redemption through their opportunity to learn and grow. The story ultimately advocates for fostering a respectful and inclusive workplace culture, where actions, not appearances, define character. What did you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment where someone was unfairly judged? We'd love to hear your perspective, or a real-life story where kindness or accountability made a difference. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this.